the knowledge-based content of GCSEs is becoming less useful, basically, for students in an age of the internet and AI, where knowledge is very, very easily accessible. What's not so easily accessible is the skills. So if you think about the skills that you develop during GCSEs, that's got to be kind of equally important as the content of the subject that you're studying.
Most young people leave education with qualifications but little clarity about how to get hired or build something of their own. This is Future Careers Made Clear. Practical conversations about how early careers actually take shape. Hi, I'm Sandra Davis. This week I'm joined by Heather Rhodes, Head of Highgrove Education, a pioneering British online school, to talk about GCSE options and why these choices matter, and just as importantly, why they don't always matter in the way that families are led to believe. We look at how subject choices can shape future pathways, where flexibility really exists, and how parents and young people can approach this stage with confidence rather than panic. Hi, welcome back to the One Big Next Future Careers Made Clear podcast. I'd like to welcome today's guest, who is Heather Rhodes, who is the founder and principal of Highgrove Education. Hi, Heather. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so Highgrove Education is an online secondary school. That means we serve families who are studying from home to take their education. Most of our students study with us full time. Some study part time on single courses, or occasionally we have students looking for supplementary tuition. But most of our students will take like a full education with us, and we offer secondary education, GCSEs and A levels, and all of the kind of bells and whistles you would expect from an independent school education. So not just the academics, but clubs and societies, electives, house system, and so on.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So we're here today, we're going to talk particularly about choosing GCSE options. I know you're very expert in this area, which is why I've invited you on. So can you start with, can you outline what parents need to think about and students need to think about when they're choosing their options?
Yeah, I mean, the first question we often get asked is how many to choose. If you're at a school, quite often your school will dictate how many GCSEs you should be taking. There might be a little bit of flexibility. For students who are homeschooling or studying at an online school, there's much more choice. And then, of course, what subjects are compulsory? There's all sorts of questions about science, because we have that system in the UK of double science versus two single sciences or three single sciences. And I think all of those things are kind of, you need to work your way through by making sure you really understand the system. It's probably easier for UK based families. We have lots of international families as well. So if you're new to the UK education system, it can take a while to learn all of the quirks of it.
Lovely, thank you. So are there any particular concerns or uncertainties that get raised other than the subject choice, do you find?
Um, well, I mean, I think very often families don't aren't sure how to choose the subjects, how to make that selection. So, I mean, we always say that subjects like maths and English language, those two are absolutely
Yeah,
vital, because they're
non-negotiable, I would say.
exactly, yeah. If you don't have those, you're going to struggle with future options. And then I think really with GCSEs you want to go for breadth over specialism, and so a lot of schools will ensure that you take particular subjects from particular categories. So take at least one humanity, for example, at least one language. Sometimes I think there's that difference between what you might enjoy studying and what you might need for the future career that you're
Yes.
interested in, which if you're lucky they overlap. GCSEs don't determine your future career, but they do impact the A levels that are available to you. And so it's quite young, really, at 14 to be thinking about the long-term future. But just keeping your options open, I think, is a key thing with GCSEs. Hence going for breadth over like a specialisation at that age.
And that's interesting because I know obviously you run an online school, which is still quite unusual, but very much a growing area. And so do you, within your structure, do you also enforce a breadth on the students, or is it actually very flexible and more a one-to-one negotiation?
Yeah, we go for the one-to-one negotiation route. So rather than dictating what students do, we'll advise and we'll chat to the students and their parents on the way into the school, or our year nine students as they're with us and thinking about choices. We will advise students. I mean, first of all, we'll advise them to take maths and English language. Those really are the vital
Yeah,
ones.
yeah.
I would expect students to take English literature and at least two of the three sciences as well. Those are the kind of core curriculum subjects. And then beyond that, it's ideal to take a humanity. I think you need to think about the skills that you're building through the GCSEs, because GCSEs you're not just studying them from a point of view of the knowledge that they cover, but the skills that they develop. Structured writing, for example, you're going to learn that through English, you're going to learn that through humanities, analytical thinking through subjects like history and sciences, logical reasoning through maths, computer studies, and then creativity through the arts-based subjects. And it's great at GCSE level to develop skills across the board. And so we will speak with students. I mean, if they're really strongly against a particular area, so I don't know, if they're really not big fan of humanities, we'll look at subjects that might work, play to their interests. So something like global citizenship, for example, instead of history or geography, might be something that's of more interest to them, but still kind of covers off some of the analytical thinking and structured writing skills that they would need to develop.
Thank you. And it's interesting you've raised that about talking a lot about skills, and we'll come to this bit a bit later, is obviously the future world of work and how that might be evolving. And a lot of
Yeah.
work I do is all around skills development. So it's interesting that you're drawing out that theme when you're talking about GCSE choices.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the knowledge-based content of GCSEs is becoming less useful, basically, for students in an age of the internet and AI, where knowledge is very, very easily accessible. What's not so easily accessible is the skills. So if you think about the skills that you develop during GCSEs, that's got to be kind of equally important as the content of the subject that you're studying.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to look at it. It's really interesting. So while
Mm.
we're just focusing very much on GCSE choices, are there any misconceptions you find from parents that you often have to tackle?
Yeah, I mean, for us, because we don't have a set number of GCSEs, one very common thing that we hear is that the more GCSEs, the better. And so parents trying to get in, I don't know, 11 or 12 GCSEs, cram the academics into the timetable, not really leave room for extracurricular. Um, Perhaps the well-being balance is a little
Yes.
out of kilter if you're really going overboard on the number of GCSEs. I mean, really, a smaller number and better quality outcomes and more time for extracurricular, I think, is a more sensible way forwards than taking as many GCSEs as you can fit into your week and not having enough time for exploring learning beyond GCSEs.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because obviously that's about developing or producing a really holistic education that allows the child to grow in a really rounded way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing for us is in the UK system, we do have this very rigid timetable typically where all of your GCSEs are taken together in year 11 when you're 16. And actually, there's some of our students will take GCSEs early, some of them will take them later, some of them will take them spread out across 1 or 2 years, and actually even take GCSEs alongside A levels. So, British families in particular who've gone through the system themselves often think of GCSEs as being very structured, very rigid, and don't necessarily consider alternative ways of taking GCSEs so that you're taking them at a time that suits the child rather than at a time that suits the educational framework that we have within the school system.
And that, of course, is the great thing about an online school is you can be more flexible.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we're in the lucky position to be able to offer that. I can see that timetabling wise, it would be a challenge in a
Yes.
traditional school. But at the minute, the educational system does restrict students based on what works for the school as a whole rather than what works for the individual student.
Yeah. And it's quite interesting actually thinking about taking GCSEs perhaps over a couple of years rather than in one lump. It kind of ties in quite closely to the growing area of micro credentials in the world of work and the idea of long-term lifelong learning as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also just great practice if you take an exam, if you take at least one GCSE before the rest of your subjects, gives you that practice of going through revision period, examination, and understanding of what to expect, which is great. It helps you develop because the system we have, it's not just about your knowledge and your understanding, it's about your ability to apply that knowledge and understanding under exam conditions, which is quite a different thing.
Yes, and
And if
some people better than others, of course.
absolutely, yeah. So at least if you've taken something earlier than other subjects, it can help you when you come to take the remainder of your subjects.
Yeah, and I guess you also find with obviously mental health being a big issue at the moment with young people. I guess that has something where you can kind of, if you spread the GCSEs for some children, that's probably really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I mean, we offer modular GCSEs now at the school. That's because we're kind of registered as an international centre. About 40% of our kids are
Ah,
international,
okay, yeah,
which means that we can offer the modular version if students want to. And it's been incredibly popular with our students because it means that they're not taking everything at the same time in the summer. And we have students who have exam anxiety, and that helps allay that. We also have a lot of professional athletes, and the summer isn't necessarily going to be the best time for them to take a whole lot of exams, depending on their sport. So, the modular approach does help with the like breaking up the load and the stress as well of taking them all together.
yeah. So that's really interesting, and again, it also playing to this whole micro credentials agenda.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to see the way that you're using your independence, your flexibility of the structure of your school, and the fact you're registered internationally to kind of take advantage of those moves forward that obviously a state school in this country can't currently do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, we're at an advantage as an online school because we don't have the same kind of restrictions that a physical school would have, either in timetabling and because we're an international centre, we've got the flexibility of like the modular qualifications as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So let's just move back, kind of more focusing on the actual choices and the impact of those choices.
Hmm.
Can you just talk a bit about, sort of in practical terms, how GCSE subject choices impact the future in terms of choices at sixth form and potentially beyond?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the main impact is on the A levels that you can take if you're going from GCSEs through to A levels. So there's often a minimum grade requirement in GCSEs to take the corresponding A level. So, for example, if you want to take maths at A level, I think most schools or colleges would need at least a six, very often at least a seven, in order to take maths. If you're looking at further maths, you're probably looking at an eight or nine at GCSE.
Yeah,
And those grades are set based on the typical trajectory of students from GCSE to A level. So
yeah,
if you're getting a four or a five in a subject at GCSE, you're probably going to struggle with the content at A level. Some of those are straightforward pathways, so GCSE maths through to A-level maths. Some of them, for example, if you're taking economics or psychology or computer science at A-level, you're also going to need your six or your seven in maths in order to be able to access the mathematical content of those A-levels. So and you do also minimize your workload if you're studying something at GCSE that you then go on to study at A level. So, for example, business A level, GCSE business isn't a requirement, but it's helpful. It means you will have
Yeah.
covered a lot of the basics
Yes.
already. And with A level, you do need to consider that they're quite heavy subjects already. So if you are taking four A levels, which all have very new content, and there's not much overlap between your A levels, you've got a much more challenging time in your sixth form than if you're taking, say, three A levels where you've studied the corresponding GCSE, and perhaps if you take a couple of sciences and a maths, then there's quite a bit of overlap
Yeah.
between those subjects.
So I'm interested where you've talked about the grade six or grade seven as a minimum requirement. Is that a legal requirement or is that something
No,
that schools do just
no.
to
Yeah,
kind of gatekeep
it,
effectively?
yeah, it's set on a school by school basis, and actually, as an online school, we're a bit more flexible, and we look at potential and circumstances rather than just the academic outcomes. But some schools will have lower academic requirements to go onto the A level course. You might find that there's a sixth form college who will accept you onto the A level course with a four or a five, a pass in your GCSE. But the fact is that A levels are challenging, and if you don't have the baseline knowledge from your GCSE, you're going to have to work a lot harder at A level. So, for example, we often take students from other national curriculums who may well have gaps in their baseline knowledge because they haven't studied GCSEs prior, they've studied something else. Um, and in some areas, they're going to have to work a little bit harder in order to cover the full A level content. Doesn't mean you can't do it, it just means that there's a higher workload involved.
Okay, so I can imagine that there might be sort of extenuating circumstances where you've talked about high level athletes, for example, who perhaps haven't achieved at GCSE because they've been extremely busy at the key time, but are very much academically capable. So it
Yeah,
sounds like really the main thing with that grade six or that grade seven is that the data shows that students who come in with low grades and that typically don't do well at A level. So it's really to protect the students as much as anything.
yeah. I mean, we're similar to quite a lot of independent schools in that we set an in-house test for our applicants for A-level courses, and we'll offer a place based on that test. And some independent schools will then also say, and you need to get this grade in your GCSEs. Others will be a bit more flexible. With us, we do have perhaps probably a slightly higher proportion of students who have exam anxiety or who, for health reasons, are studying online rather than in a physical school. And so we're quite understanding that sometimes the outcomes don't reflect the ability level or the work
Yeah.
put in. And we're kind of happy to take students based on entrance tests and a conversation with the the head of subject, and look at potential over ability. Some schools will have that approach, others will be a little bit more rigorous
Rigid,
and
I guess.
rigid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It depends on the type of school, doesn't it?
totally. Yeah.
Great. So looking a bit further ahead, so you've talked a lot about breadth and skill development, which is great with the GCSEs.
Mm.
How much do GCSE choices actually matter from a career perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, not massively, because I think most careers, English and maths obviously will
Yeah,
have an
gatekeeper
impact.
subjects, aren't they? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. In general, most careers will look at the general picture rather than specific subjects. where it becomes more important is your choice of A levels. And then if you then want to go on to university, your choice of A levels has quite a large impact on the university degrees you can select. And then, of course, your university degree may well impact what career is open to you. So your GCSEs, I mean, they're particularly important if you're someone who's thinking you might want to go to Oxford or Cambridge or study medicine, because in those circumstances, your grade averages will be very important for your GCSEs because that will be a part of the assessment picture when a university is selecting a candidate. It doesn't mean you can't get into a very competitive university degree course with weaker GCSE grades, but you probably need a narrative to explain your educational journey that you've been on
Yeah.
and to show why your grades perhaps don't reflect your ability level when you get to university. So the in terms of subject choice, not really so much. Breadth again is useful. Um, in terms of grades, it tends to be the averages rather than individual grades, and the individual grades are only particularly important when you're looking at A level choices, which ones are open to you.
So it sounds like there's quite a lot of flexibility actually post GCSE, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can always go back and like if you've chosen subjects that then don't fully reflect where you want to go to in the future, you can always go back and take another GCSE alongside an A level or start a GCSE in year 11, either aiming to get through it in a year or to take it across year 11 and then year 12 alongside A levels. Again, that kind of flexibility is much easier in an online setting than it is in a more traditional school where it might not be quite so open to that.
Yeah, great. And moving on to kind of thinking about how options work in traditional schools and a standard sort of state school in the UK particularly. A lot of state schools will use fixed option blocks, and they're
Mm.
obviously then forcing students sometimes to choose between subjects they otherwise perhaps want to do both of, but they're in the same block. How do you think families and students should deal with that situation?
Yeah, I mean, it can be really frustrating, can't it? Some schools will show some flexibility if you're really keen on a taking two GCSE subjects from the same block. It's always worth speaking to the school and seeing if there's any flexibility. Is there a way you can take it by studying independently and having going to an after school club or working off timetable with a teacher. Teachers are always really pleased if there's a student
Yeah,
who's super enthusiastic about
indeed.
their subject, so it can work out. There are, I mean, sometimes the constraints are, there's often a reason for them. For example, it's not useful to take all humanities and no sciences, and so it's there are reasons that are worthwhile for having those blocks. But I think a lot of the blocking is just because there's only so many teachers available at a school at a
Yeah, the
particular.
practicalities really, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And under those circumstances, I think taking the subject elsewhere is a sensible option. I mean, we offer after school GCSEs in quite a few subjects that sometimes students will struggle to find at their school, or sometimes the subject blocks mean they can't take them, and so they can then kind of take the subjects that they choose at school and take another subject through online schooling. It's homeschooling as well. I mean, if you're someone who's good at independent study, the the higher you go through the education system, the more challenging it is to study independently.
Yeah.
But GCSEs quite often possible, particularly if you've got a parent who's very helpful as a kind of mentor.
Yeah, that's great. And it's quite interesting all the things you said about the fixed option blocks. I think it's they're there for a reason. It's partly practical and it's partly to maintain that breadth. But I'm just thinking about a student I helped in the past where we were in a
Mm,
situation where design technology and computer science clashed, but she passionately wanted to go to Dyson. And so the timetable was changed to accommodate. And then the A level, design technology and computer science clashed again, and she really needed both for Dyson, and the timetable was changed, and she went to Dyson, and she's now, I think, in her fourth year at Dyson. But
awesome.
it shows
Yeah.
that it can make a big difference, and it's worth asking
Yeah.
because you never know.
Yeah. And I think sometimes schools haven't necessarily thought through all of the clashes within option blocks because those two options are very common ones to take together if you're somebody who's
Yes,
interested in product design, engineering, and no school will want to limit students' future choices. It's great that they managed to kind of shuffle the subjects around.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's very good for her, and obviously it meant the difference. It literally made the difference to her life because that was what she really,
Yeah,
really wanted to do. So it's
yeah, and a very well done to her because it's a hugely competitive process getting into
yes, yeah.
Dyson. So yeah,
Very challenging. She
she's
worked
done
very
very
hard.
well.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
worked very hard to get in. So great. Just had to think about the online education. Have you got, what misconceptions do parents have about online education that you meet?
Well, the main one I think is that it's lower quality, which is, I, I, I mean, it's not true. When I was running Harrow School Online, which was the school I was running prior to Highgrove, we actually got higher A level grades than Harrow School did.
Wow.
Every year that we ran A levels, um, so it's not. It's certainly not lower quality to study online. I think the difficulty is finding the right provider because there are a lot of online schools and some of them will have an academic focus, but many of them won't necessarily be geared towards students who are academically ambitious. So lower quality, no. The one of the difficulties I think in talking with parents about online education is that parents won't have gone through online education themselves.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, their only point of reference is going to be their own school system, and the way we teach online is fairly different to a traditional school system. We have quite a high focus on the independent study, which students will do prior to going to a lesson with a teacher. So they work through self-study lessons. Those lessons will teach them the curriculum and give them plenty of questions to check their understanding. And then they'll go to a lesson with their teacher, small classes. The teacher will basically check how much they've understood from what they've studied previously and support them as they apply what they've learnt to solving questions, looking at problems, looking at past paper exams. Um, that's a very different way of learning than traditional schooling. It requires different skills as well. I mean, it builds your self-discipline, your study skills. It's probably more challenging, to be honest, learning things independently than having a teacher explain them. But because you're cognitively engaged and having to think as you go through that learning process, you retain more of the information, which is why we get good grades at the end of the
Yeah.
course because you've had to think hard in order to understand that content. So in terms of parents understanding online education, it really is tough if you've not learnt in that way previously to um, to to kind of understand um, maybe to even know what questions to ask when you're looking and comparing
Yes.
different
Yeah.
online providers because um, we do sometimes get parents now asking to see our self-study material, and I'm always delighted because it means they really understand
Yes.
how important that part of the education is.
And I'm actually really interested in that approach. I know, it's a kind of flipped learning approach, which teachers listening will be familiar
That's
with.
right, yeah.
But what's particularly interesting to me about that is thinking about all the worries people have around AI and students in schools, potentially using AI to generate their work. And obviously, the approach you're taking kind of avoids that being a problem, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we can tell very much when a student has used AI to
Yeah,
complete work because we have such we have small classes and very good visibility of students when they're working in their classes, and we use that class time to check and understand exactly how much of the self-study work a student can remember. So if you've used AI to work through your self-study lessons, you're not going to be able to kind of problem solve in the live lessons because you won't have developed that kind of confidence and retention of the information that you learn.
because you haven't
So
processed it really, have you?
exactly, yeah, and it gives you, it's a very data rich environment actually. We get a lot of data from the self-study work in
Yeah,
terms of how
interesting.
much time did a student spend on each part of the lesson,
Yeah.
and what grades did they get in each question, how many times did they repeat it. All that data can be really valuable in looking at a student's approach to studying. And we have another role that you don't have typically in schools. We have a role of a coach alongside our teaching team. We have a coaching team, and the coaches will help students develop those independent study skills, and they'll look at the data on how they're studying and support them to improve their study habits because it's really important for us because it will get the students successfully through the course. But those skills that a student learns in doing so, they're also really important life skills. It makes you a really kind of proactive self-starter if you're used to being kind of having that responsibility to sit down and study.
Yeah, which I think actually is a really good preparation for the world of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. Let's move on to just talking about co-curricular. I know in your
Mm.
school you refer to them as electives, which is quite an American term, I think. Um,
Mm.
so we talked a little bit earlier about breadth in GCSEs, and we talked a little bit about holistic education. So can you talk to me about your kind of approach to electives? I know you've got a hugely wide range, and I'm quite fascinated to hear more about it.
Yeah, well, we used the term electives. I mean, actually, it was just the term that was being used at Harrow School, and so when we
Ah,
were
okay.
running Harrow School online, we kind of adopted the same terminology, and our elective courses are um, non-examined subjects that give students a chance to learn something that's outside the national curriculum, outside the GCSE and A-level syllabuses. And I just think it's such an important part of a student's education because it allows you to experiment, to find things that you're interested in. To it puts the joy back into learning because you're learning for fun rather than because you've got to memorize a whole lot of information for an exam at the end of the course. And it also offers stretch and challenge in a way that for some students GCSEs won't
Yeah,
necessarily
because for some students
stretch
they
them
can
too
be really
much.
quite easy, can't they, the GCSEs?
That's right, yeah. So if you've got something to kind of get your teeth into on the side, it gives you the chance to stretch yourself academically. And and also, I mean, one major problem with GCSEs is that there's a very long lag in the development of the curriculum. Because whenever new technology is released,
Yes.
it will take a couple of years for
As
the
a former
exam
computer
boards.
science teacher, yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, computer science is a really good example. I think we use Pearson edXL as our exam board. I think they're absolutely great, but they do still have an A level called ICT, which is,
Bizarre.
something from the 1990s.
As far as I'm aware, that didn't exist since about 2015 as a subject. But
Yeah, well, I mean, they're moving over to computer science now, I believe. But the problem is, even the computer science curriculum. It just takes such a long time to develop the curriculum, develop the materials, and so there's a lag in terms of what you're learning and where society has moved to, and electives can fill that gap very nicely. So we've got quite a few electives on AI, for example, which give students hands-on uh, practice using AI and guidance around the ethics and an understanding of how AI actually works, so they know its limitations as well. And that's another thing that you can't do through the GCSE and the A level curriculums.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, obviously, with the GCSEs, they're all very regulated. You have to cover what you have to cover. And one of the super important things about school is that each child finds their passion. And I think those electives are
Yeah.
giving such a huge opportunity to find something you really love.
Yeah, totally. I mean, quite a few of our subjects are kind of taster subjects. So things like Introduction to Sociology. Students can take that elective, get a feel for what sociology
Ah,
is,
handy.
and make
Yeah.
a decision about would they want to do that at A level. And then things like forensics. Now, that is not a subject that you study at GCSE or A level,
No,
but you
no.
may well want to go on and study at university. So having subjects that allow you to take on a little bit of learning from the next stage of your education is great in giving you a taster. Do you actually like those things? Does the content actually match what you had expected
Yes, of
it
course.
to?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's also, we find, really helpful for students when they're applying for university and they can show that they've already been working at the level that maybe is covered in some of the first year undergraduate syllabus. It's really helpful for interview, being able to talk confidently about subjects which are beyond the A level curriculum. So things like thermodynamics and game theory are university, considered as university level
Yeah, oh,
subjects.
definitely.
But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
And so I'm
um,
thinking also about just the students who might be aspiring to Oxbridge. How do
yeah.
the electives play into that? Because it sounds to me like they're quite useful.
Yeah, I mean, we do actually have an Oxbridge elective where students who are interested in applying to Oxbridge get experience in the tutorial style of tuition. So there's a group of students who will take it in turns to present on a particular subject and then have to defend their ideas and engage with it's a great system of teaching for some students, but actually some students really dislike that way of uh, teaching and learning. And it's great to know before you get to Oxbridge rather
Yeah,
than after
absolutely.
whether
Yeah.
it suits you.
Yeah, because for
Yeah.
some people, I guess for some students, that's utterly terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people just prefer to kind of defend ideas in writing rather than in speech. So a tutorial style it isn't playing to their strengths.
Yeah.
Um, but I think also with Oxbridge, I mean, it's so competitive. It can really help. So some of our electives are designed to give you a bit of zing on your UCAS application. We've got Introduction to Investment is probably the one that is most helpful in that respect because it's actually preparing students for a postgraduate qualification. So exams by the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investment. We've had three students so far take the Intro to Investment exam, then the next one, which is a follow-on elective, which is, I think, financial asset management, and then one more course. They've become qualified as stockbrokers before they've left the school.
Wow.
Having something like that on your UCAS application for the highly competitive finance degrees
Yes.
can really help you stand out and just showcase your passion, I suppose, for that
Yeah.
subject.
It also sounds like when it comes to writing those UCAS applications, it sounds to me like a lot of your students have already got the material to draw on, and then not having a mad scramble to read articles and find videos and kind of gather evidence at the last minute effectively. It's just so common.
Yeah, well, our coaches work with our students from the point at which they join the school, as well as supporting them becoming more confident at independent learning. They also help them work out what their academic profile should look like in terms of the extracurriculars, the electives, the clubs and societies, the things that they do outside of school, their wider reading. And so we'll, from a fairly early point, push people in the direction of taking extension courses. If they say to us that they really want to go to Oxbridge and study a maths degree, well, we know that they're going to need to do as much stretch and challenge within maths as possible in order to get there. Um, just making sure that our students are prepared from an early stage, and that also goes for the university access exams actually. So things like for maths, like your step exam if you want to go into
Yeah.
Cambridge, or your mat if you want to go to Oxford. Um, there are quite a few exams that are university gatekeepers, which um, students need to take as seriously as their A levels.
Yeah.
So the score you get in your LNAT, if you want to go on to a law degree, is going to be just as important in determining whether you're able to get onto that competitive degree course as the outcomes of your A levels. So we prepare students for those in the elective courses as well.
Brilliant. So it sounds like those electives are they're just absolutely fundamental to what you're doing.
Yeah, we wouldn't function as a school without them, I don't think. Like we would be more like an academic tuition centre than a school without the extracurricular.
That's such a good way of putting it. And obviously,
Mm,
we would consider a school to be a really holistic experience, and it's part of what
absolutely.
it means to be a school.
Absolutely. And I think the same goes actually for the clubs and societies that we run. They're student led, and so they give students the chance to develop leadership and teamwork skills. Without that kind of opportunity within a school, is it really a school?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you've got to have all of that wider opportunity for students beyond the academics in order for them to get the most out of their education.
perfect. Thank you. And so that's kind of perfect time for us to move on. I want to pick your brains really on the future of education. I'm just curious. Yeah, you're somewhat of a
Mm.
trailblazer. So where do you see schools going in the next 5 to 10 years? Big question, obviously 5 to 10 years at this point, but I'm interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think I really do think that flipped learning and hybrid provision will become more and more common within the school system. Flipped learning because of the efficacy. If you look at the grades that you can get when
And just
you're
to clarify, so with flipped learning, you're talking about where the students do the work before the class and then they come to the class and work with the teacher on their understanding in the model you've described.
That's right, yeah. And actually, where there's a little bit less class time and a little bit more time for independent learning, which makes it much more flexible in terms of timetabling than traditional learning. So it's not just about kind of swapping the order of classwork and homework and bringing the homework first. It's also about cutting down on the talk time to give students um, more time to study independently, which I think schools like they're very often nervous about that because they feel that the more teacher time, the better. But you need to think about how that time is being spent because if you're a student in a class, like particularly in within the state system, in a class of 30 kids, and um, your teacher is moving at the pace of the bulk of the students within the class. The top end and the low end of that class will very often become disengaged. I do think it's a bit of a fallacy that you can have one teacher teaching 30 students and being able to differentiate a learning pathway within
Yeah,
that time from
nobody
all of those
nobody is
30
that.
students. No,
It's so no, it's so
it may
difficult.
well, yeah, it's an aspiration, but it's not one that I've ever seen managed very successfully, or at least it's not. It's much more successful to manage that online through independent study materials where students genuinely are working at their own pace. And so I can imagine more schools wanting to have an approach where there's a slightly higher reliance on technology to deliver content, and then the teachers are doing the kind of vital bit and the fun bit really of educating, which is helping students to apply what they've learned to solving problems, or kind of engaging within debate and discussion, and giving feedback on the development of their ideas, which is the vital bit of teaching, which traditionally that's often left to marking homework. Like students will learn stuff in class, they'll practice it for homework, and the teachers will write some feedback on the piece of writing. Now, how much of that feedback the student actually takes on board is likely to be relatively limited. So I do think there will be a movement towards this, and I hope there will be, because I think the school system that we have, I don't think it works for every child. I think there's a lot of students who are disengaged, and I think that preparing students so that for life by teaching them only to work under the supervision of a teacher, it isn't really a great thing for careers or for university. It might help with control, but it doesn't help with developing proactivity and skills and time management, workload management, all things that are kind of key for the future. So I do think that kind of flipped learning, and also probably hybrid provision, where that's where an online school will support a physical school by delivering part of the program through online provision, or through supporting with the flipped learning materials, and for the local teachers to then do the actual live lessons with
Yeah.
students. I can imagine that also growing quite rapidly over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting you've touched on kind of the best bit of teaching, as we will know, being teachers is actually working with the students and giving the feedback and helping them move on their thinking. And I can kind of see how that has it gives the students a better experience, but also gives the teachers a better experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think teachers can feel the difficulty and the stress in delivering content to a class, a large class, or a class that has many different levels within that class. And if you want to get the most out of teachers, actually cutting the class sizes, allowing some of the heavy lift to be done by the students rather than by the teacher, it's good for everyone. It's good for the students, it's good for the teacher.
Great. And so that's a future of education, which is good for everyone, which is what we're all looking for.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm always wildly optimistic about these things, and I
Oh,
do hope
you
that
have to be.
gradually they will start to filter back to mainstream schools, because I think education is an area that's incredibly slow to change.
Yeah.
There's a real drag factor. I think rightly rightly so in many ways. Schools are worried about making sweeping changes that may disenfranchise students. But I think we've got to the point in our system that it's clear that it's not working as it stands, and we need to make sweeping changes in order to make it work better for students.
Yeah, and I think the growth of online hybrid schools is kind of leading and demonstrating in that area. So we're coming towards the end of our time now. So I've got
Mm.
three questions to finish off with. First of all, what this is thinking about kind of jobs more generally. What one piece of advice would you give to a young person trying to secure an entry level job today given how incredibly competitive it is?
Yeah. Am I allowed to?
Yeah, go on.
Excellent. Okay, so the first is kind of your approach to that, needing to be proactive, flexible, needing to not wait for things to come to you, but go out and try and make things happen yourself. So don't just browse apprenticeship opportunities. Ask around all of your connections, get yourself a LinkedIn presence, start reaching out to people and try and find opportunities rather than just wait for them to be put in front of you. And this is slightly connected, to be honest. We're really promoting entrepreneurship amongst our students because I think that there really is a situation for students leaving university at the moment that is quite different from even 5 years, 10 years ago. That a lot of the graduate employment schemes that would have been a very common path for academic students are not taking on the same numbers of students as they were previously, or are not taking on students at all. And that's partly because AI is now available to do lots of those graduate level entry jobs. It's partly just the kind of changing nature of the world of work. But if you consider entrepreneurship as an option and you look at kind of setting things up by yourself or with other students, even if it's like a side hustle at university, or something you do on a gap year, it firstly gives you an amazing skill set and perhaps differentiates you from other candidates for those entry level training schemes, but it also gives you another option. Maybe your career will be one which is self-made rather than one which is determined by which career pathway you can jump onto. And I think that is something that young people should be considering, that schools don't do enough at the moment to promote in general.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One Big Next, we're also really keen on entrepreneurship. At the end of the day, it's a tough competitive environment. You can be applying for hundreds of jobs over a year, and you could give yourself a job tomorrow and develop a huge range of skills, and then do with those what you will, either stay as an entrepreneur or move on. But it's just a really good place to get started today rather than just keep getting hit back by these rejections.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Yeah. So, what I think I probably know the answer to this, but what big decision most shaped your career and why?
Yeah, so this is Pearson decided to close Harrow School online after it had been running for a few years, and I could well have kind of sat back and resigned myself to fate and considered finding slippers of the pipe. But I'm quite stubborn slash determined, and I spend a lot of time telling our students that they need to take control of their future. So I then when I was in the position where I could see a real need for high quality online schooling that catered to academically ambitious students, and I didn't feel that there was the right kind of provision out there, I decided to sell a flat that I wasn't living in at the time. I was
Oh, that's
renting out,
handy.
and put the money in towards opening my own school, Highgrove. Was incredibly lucky that my team from Harrow School Online decided they wanted to move across to the new school with me. So we kind of kept that wealth of knowledge and experience that you build up when you're working in a new sector. And I mean, it was an incredibly steep learning curve for me because it's the first time I've ever run a business. So
Yeah, so
I've
you're actually what you were talking about just now, you're embodying it as well. So you're such a great role model.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing. After I'd promoted entrepreneurship to my students, it's very difficult to then say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to do that myself." And I really, I mean, I wish I'd learnt more in school about setting up your own business and about kind of the financing and the management and the various I mean there's such a long list, isn't there, of things you need to be
Endless,
able to do to
endless.
be
But
an
it's really
entrepreneur.
varied. You don't get bored, do you?
You certainly do not get bored, no, and no regrets whatsoever. I mean, I've drunk more coffee over the last few years than I think I did in all of my life beforehand. But I'm incredibly proud of our school, and I mean, I think ultimately we're in a position now where we've got really high quality school and a little bit more like control over the direction of that school and flexibility over what we can offer. So it's very easy to decide to, for example, go into a hybrid partnership with another school without having to worry about passing that decision through different layers of
Yes, because you're
management
in
and so
charge, so
on.
you can
Exactly.
you can crack on.
Exactly.
Which leads me to my final question: what's next? I know you've just got back from an exciting trip, so I wonder if that maybe is what you're going to tell me.
Yeah, that I mean that probably is what's next for us actually. I mean, Highgrove is always going to be our flagship school, and Highgrove Online School I think is like an example of just how good online only education can be. But I do think that the future of education as a whole will be in hybrid provision. And I've been in discussion with several schools about supporting their school with hybrid provision. The most exciting project I'm working on at the moment is a school that's based out in the Himalayas Valley in India. Beautiful location,
I'm so
re
jealous.
relatively remote, and so somewhere that's kind of historically been slightly underserved with educational opportunities. And India has a massive youth population. I think 70% of the population is under 35.
Really?
It's
Wow.
incredible, yeah. So they've got a real bulge in terms of young people coming through the education system and a need to provide for them and the desire to provide education on a kind of world class level to enable the kind of most academically ambitious students to be able to go on to world leading universities, both inside India. They've got some really exciting partnerships with overseas universities who are supporting also with hybrid learning and also international universities. I think the UK is a popular destination for students from
Yeah.
India. So we're supporting the school with a full secondary education. We're providing the academic education, and then the local team is providing amazing infrastructure and facilities and local support for those students.
So that is fantastic. So really, many congratulations on that, and I love the
Thank
fact that you're
you.
now demonstrating through your entrepreneurship the scaling of a business as well. So you're just a great role model. So thank you very
Oh,
much, Heather.
well,
I appreciate
yeah,
it.
I'm incredibly grateful that other institutions are kind of trusting us with their academic provision. And as I said, I do think that's the future of education does lie in collaboration, both internationally and just within the UK as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your
Thank
time
you.
today. Thank you. That's it for this episode of Future Careers Made Clear. If you'd like practical tools to support what comes next, you can explore the One Big Next app. I'm Sandra Davis. Thanks for listening.